So you're probably here because you want to create a Game Boy game, and you've come to the right place. So our video for today will be how to get started with GBStudio. And if you want to create your first game, I'm here to tell you, once you realize how simple GBStudio is, you will be on your way in no time. What's going on today, everybody? This is Ant from Ant's Retro Game Armory. As I said, today we're going to be doing an orientation and intro to GBStudio, which is a visual program used for designing Game Boy games. So there are likely a lot of tutorials out there like this or about this. However, I think that the visual part of this video will be helpful as we actually go through GBStudio, in contrast to the written guide, which is available at gbstudio.dev, which will be linked at this video. But my overall goal today is to orient you all and familiarize you all with GBStudio, in the hopes that if this video speaks to you differently than a different video, or vice versa, you'll be able to go ahead and get started with GBStudio. So today this video will mirror the Getting Started section on the site. And it's really easy to get started. I already mentioned that a few times, but some topics here are shown on the screen. We'll go through a couple bullet points and then hop right into the program. So some things to consider as you hop in: you'll be given the choice to select the pre-existing template or a new project. And really what the developer recommends is mess around with the template and the samples first so you can get a feel for how things are set up. So I'll show you those. There's a really robust example project in there for you to look at and edit. While if you're coming back for your second or third game, maybe you can just start a new template. So for those who haven't opened it before, the program is broken into these areas. The game space is in the middle. That's basically your whiteboard, and the tools to go along with it. The editor toolbar is to your right, where you do most of your code and your actions. The navigator is on the left with certain things like scripts and scenes. And your debugger is at the bottom. That is basically used to see your different variables and their values as you run through your game. Okay, guys, so we're going to go ahead and open up GBStudio. So as you first open it, really what you'll come to is a new screen here. So this is where you can either pick your template or a blank project. So you can put your name in here, definitely save it to your desktop. And first I'll open the sample project and briefly talk about that, and then I'll open up a different project. It's a little bit smaller to explain the layout. Okay, so we are here within the sample project. So what's nice about the sample project is that it has all the different types of scenes, which we'll cover in a bit. But what's really nice about this is everything's set up for you. You don't have to concentrate on drawing anything or importing any assets yet, because it's all here for you. And you can see how the triggers work. You can see how the logo screens work, how the actors work, and like I said, it has all the different kind of scenes that you can have. So the devs did us a huge favor here and put these things in. So this is a shoot 'em up scene, platformer scene, top down scene, and a couple logos and titles, which is cool. So that's the template that's available to us through the initial screen on GBStudio. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a little bit of a smaller project to show you all the layout. So this is a game I started on that has an interesting premise, but I'm not sure where I want to go with it. But basically, General Patton, who was in World War II, U.S. General Patton, had the idea that he was reincarnated as a soldier many times. So I took that idea and was going to make some kind of game about how a company or the government was exploiting soldiers' memories for some kind of profit or gain. But I only have these scenes, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go with it yet, or if I'm going to go anywhere with it. So I'll use this screen to briefly just explain the layout. Really, if you've worked with computers before, this will come second nature to you. And as I always say, if you know how to run Excel, basically you can create a Game Boy game, especially through GBStudio. So as you can see, it's very visual, and I'll take you through the different aspects of the screen. So this drop-down bar is Game World here. These are kind of like your tabs to the overall game. The main ones you'll be working in is Game World, which is shown here. The Sprite Editor, which has all your actors in it. I don't use images too much. Then you have your music, where you can import and compose music. Sound effects as well. And then you can have your color palettes, which you can work off of different palettes and edit those. Dialogue review. So I have some dialogue here that you can review and access which screen it's on, and what's nice about that is you don't have to keep going around to each scene. You can see everything here. So this is kind of like my backstory for this memory linking program. Not really well thought out yet, but just want to get this down in my whiteboard. And then settings. There's a whole ton of settings here you can use to make changes, which could probably be a whole nother video. So I would say for this, for each something specific, you want to go to the written guide to see what each of these are. So we'll go ahead and go through this screen. We already described it earlier. This is the game space, or the game world, excuse me. This is like your whiteboard where you organize all your scenes and actors. This is pretty much where the game happens. So within there, you pretty much use these tools. So you have a pointer, you have an add, which you can add actor, trigger, and scene. And there's shortcut keys for all of those. We'll cover those in a minute. You have an eraser, which is nice. You can erase your actors or your collisions with this tool. So you can use the big block or the small block. So that's really helpful as you're going through. So collisions, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of collisions, but you can use those in top-down 2D. You can use those in platformer as well. So this is a full collision. This one is you can basically pass through the bottom of it, but the top will be a collision. So imagine you can jump up through it. This one will be the opposite. You can not jump up through it, but you can fall through it. And then these are the left and right things of the same premise. The left and right collisions of the same premise. And then here's a ladder, which is really helpful for platformers. And then your last tool is your color mode. So I typically don't mess with that because I like the color palette of just the normal Game Boy, so I can focus on my story and my gameplay. But you can turn on color mode for Game Boy Color games there in the tools. So before we go to the left and right, we'll continue across. This is a search bar, which I believe you can search. You can search pretty much any aspect, I believe. So there you go. Typed in scene 2 and then highlighted that for us, which is cool. So it's a search bar. This folder here is your root folder for the project. So that's going to hold all your assets, all your sprites, all your backgrounds. They have to be loaded into that folder, which will bring them into the game. So if you're using your pixel art software, that's where things need to be saved. But through this method, you can click on the folder, and you can actually get into the folder straight from there. It's nice. Okay, and this big guy right here, that's going to run your game. So you can emulate it right here in GBStudio, which is really nice. You don't have to create a ROM, put it on an SD card for an emulator, and then play it. You can play it right here on the computer. So those that's what's across the top here. So as we said, this is game world. This is your whiteboard. The navigator tool is over here on the left. So this is just a quick reference for all your scenes. You can click around easily. So what's nice about GBStudio is a lot of built-in tools just to save time, which is nice. So also over here, you have prefabs. I don't use those too much, but they're there for you. You have scripts, so if you write recurring scripts, they'll be in here. And then you have your variables, so this lists all your variables for the game, so you can easily get to them. So these are really handy if you're having like a huge game, complex game. Those are handy. So going across the bottom, you have your debugger, which will run when your game is being emulated up here. So what's nice about that is you can see where your variables are at as you're playing the game, even if they're not shown on the screen. So check out the other video in this playlist that regards scripting of on init, on update, and on interact, where I show you how I use that in that video. So lastly, over here on the right is going to be the editor panel, where you basically do all of your coding. So this is really where everything happens right here. So as we said, we have on init, player hit. This is where I'm attaching scripts to the buttons that I want to do here. So if I'm kind of in a trench here, if I hit left and right, that takes me to these different areas. So I wanted to, this is where you program everything in. But really, guys, these commands are very visual. It's really kind of a point and click type of program, which is really awesome. So the one last thing I wanted to show you guys in the editor tools here, in the editor panel, is the type of scene you're on can be changed right here. So you can do this one of two ways if you're starting out a game. You can have your category ready for this type of game that you want. So top down 2D is going to be your Zeldas and your Pokemon type of games. Platformer, think about Super Mario. Adventure is a specialized type of game within GBStudio that I believe is not fully developed, but I believe it's got some different movement styles from the top-down 2D. So I believe that's not fully developed within the program just yet. So shoot 'em up. You guys all know these, where you basically be moving either vertically or horizontally to destroy some targets. And point and click being the last playable one. The way I use this is actually for first-person shooters, so I may make another video on that. And the logo is a special one for GBStudio as well, so you can basically have a scene that's artwork or a logo. There are limitations to GBStudio where you can only have 192 unique 8x8 pixels. And if you exceed that and you put actors and text within that scene, it will not render correctly. So if you select logo, you can basically have your cover screen without any actors or text in there. It will render correctly for you with an unlimited number of 8x8 pixels, so you can get pretty detailed with your design. So I don't believe this one's pretty close. It says 187, but it's still not exceeding it. I don't believe there's any near that. Oh, here we go, 279. So I programmed that as a logo. We'll see if it works when I go boot it up. 192 on the dot, nice. 265, okay. So we'll see if these work. We're not going to do it right now. So that's a brief overview of the type of project you can pick. So you can either come in with it decided, or the alternative method is you can see in the templated project what you want to do with with your game before you go ahead and get started. So neither one is correct or incorrect, but just a thought on how to pick your type of game. So lastly, there's some shortcuts you can use. The top ones here are really for the software, so that has to do with saving, opening projects, running the game, and exporting your ROM file. You can do those through shortcuts. And then the ones in white here are really for the game space, or really the whiteboard. You can use these letters to insert your actors, triggers, scenes, eraser mode, and collision mode. So these will pull up those menus we clicked on at the first video. So once you're all done with that, you can press the letter V as in Victor, and that will bring your pointer back to the screen. So these are the shortcuts that can save you time in GBStudio. The great thing is you really don't need them because there's a visual cue or a visual button that you can pretty much use for all of these. But these are just shortcuts if you like to be a keyboard master and use the shortcuts. So definitely be sure, guys, to check out gbstudio.dev. It has all this written out for you, and I reference that a lot as I'm making my games because there's a lot to remember, and the documentation here is really well done. So be sure to head over there and check out the collection of information that they have. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because 99% of you are not subscribed. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see any type of different tutorials for the future.